So, where to start? It's not too complicated. Acquire the books. I don't care where you get them. You get the college bookstore. You can get them online at some place. You can find them in a used bookstore someplace, or maybe borrow them from a friend. Check them out of a library. I don't care. Second thing to do is digest this PowerPoint. This PowerPoint comes in 3 parts right now. Just tried to break it up so it's easier for your attention span. I know for me, if I'm watching a video for a long period of time, I sort of lose track, get distracted. So broke it up into 3 parts for you right here. Another thing to do is go to the discussion board, look at it, start by introducing yourself to the class. Do an initial post that introduces yourself. Then as you read other students' introductions, respond to them, make comments, be friendly. You also get to take a quiz this week. At this stage, the quiz should be really easy. Familiarity with this PowerPoint and all its parts and the syllabus, that'll provide the content for you. Okay, we're finally getting to material that is unique to this class. What is ethics? It's common to look at ethics as study of right and wrong. Some differentiate between ethics and morality, with the former, that is ethics, being more critical and theoretical, and morality being more practical, hands-on, lower level. In my own approach, I tend to not make much of a distinction between ethics and morality. Put briefly, I define ethics as the inquiry into the nature of the good life and how to achieve it. I admit this is a controversial decision. In many places and times, including our own current culture, there's little agreement that there is such a thing as the good life. Well, at least not in a very substantive account of the good life that is common to all humans. It may be that our culture oscillates between focusing on commonality and focusing on difference. In eras where the focus is on commonality, we center on the features that we have in common. We see these as outweighing the differences. In eras where the focus is on difference, we center on the features that make us different from each other, that make us unique. The features we have in common are reckoned then as inconsequential. Keep in mind that this is a matter of emphasis, of focus. I take it as a fact that we humans do have things in common, things that characterize us as human. I also take it as a fact that we humans have things that differentiate us. The features that differentiate us come from more than one type of thing. Some differences are rooted in biology. Some differences are rooted in our culture. Some differences are built around our membership in groups, some around our individuality. Some differences are a matter of choice. Some are imposed on us. Anthropology is very important in my account of ethics. If we're investigating the nature of the good life and how to achieve it, well, I have to ask the question I've been pointing at. The good life for whom? Anthropology is the study of anthropos. That's the Greek word for human or humankind. Anthropology comes in many disciplines. Physical anthropology looks at the biological and physical aspects of being human. Cultural anthropology looks at the cultural dimensions of human life. When we consider Jonathan Haidt moral foundations theory a little later on in the course, we'll see that that theory is deeply influenced by cultural anthropology. We'll see that different cultures tend to build their moral and ethical systems on different understandings and uses of the moral foundations that Haidt identifies. And more on that later. This course in ethics is classed as a course in philosophy. For that reason, we'll also be considering philosophical anthropology. If this were a more specialized course in theological ethics, we'd also be considering theological anthropology. When we delve into philosophical anthropology, we use the tools and questions of philosophy to explore what it means to be human. Philosophical anthropology might present us with some of the most neglected questions in ethics. It helps us take account of certain realities. though some of these realities may be contested by some. We live in space, we live in time, we live in communities, we live in communities of communities, we live in relationships with others, and these relationships are of many kinds. We are material, physical, biological beings. We are, according to at least some major traditions, more than just material, physical, biological beings. There are some anthropological assumptions that are popular these days that I take issues with, that I question. Many assume that we are all essentially rational beings. Now, it may be obvious that not all of us do equally well at exercising our rationality, but the assumption is that rationality is a deep and essential truth about us. It is also assumed sometimes that we are disembodied rational beings. Sure, we have bodies, but our bodies are not the most important thing about us. To the contrary, our embodiedness is unavoidable. We must give attention to it. We must also take the material world into account. Even if the material world is not all there is, even if there are other aspects that are important or even more important, we cannot get away from our material world and our placement in a network of materiality. Consider our human parts for a moment. When considering what we're made of, we can answer on the elemental level, the molecular level, the level of tissues and organs, etc. Or we can, as philosophers have for ages, look at the level of our faculties. As humans, we have reason, will, emotion, bodies, loves, desires, and imagination. I take all of these to be necessary to our moral considerations. We also have limits. We would like to be unlimited, or so we imagine. But that's only, or at best, a dream. We have limited abilities. We have limited time to make decisions and to exercise our decisions. We have limited information. We can always want more, but it might be unavailable. We have limited options. We might find ourselves with only 2 options, both of which we judge to be bad in some way. We also have limited resources. Any ethical theory that treats humans as unlimited will be of little use to us, except to torture ourselves. Perhaps you've heard of Maslow's hierarchy. I don't know whether it's accurate or not, and if accurate, whether it's universally accurate. But I think it's possible that it's at least partially accurate. If it is, then we have a built-in ranking of concerns, beginning with the desire for food, water, and physical provision. That's what he identifies as physiological needs. Once we have those things, we can allow ourselves to think about other subjects: love, esteem, self-actualization, identifying ourselves as who I am, our autonomous self in the world. If we're mired in crushing poverty and on the verge of starvation, we may not be able to give much thought to ethics. One consequence of this is that if we consider thinking about ethics to be a good thing, not just for ourselves, but for others, it would be a good thing to help others have their basic needs met so they can give at least some time to thinking about ethics. One question that has been especially important in the last few centuries has been whether we understand humans and ourselves as individuals primarily or exclusively, or as part of social groups. When I speak of social groups, I have things like families, communities, schools, businesses, nations, classes, and in some cultures, castes in mind. From a simply empirical perspective, we are each part of multiple groups, some by our choice, some not so. Our relationship with and function within these groups differs from person to person and group to group. If our anthropology posits that we are best understood as part of social groups, that will have consequences for what we take to be the nature of the good life and how to achieve it. Likewise, if we think the fact that we are individuals gives the deepest truth about us, that is, if we adhere to individualistic anthropology, then that too will have consequences for what we take to be the nature of the good life and how to achieve it. Anthropology is important even when approaches to ethics that differ from mine are assumed. Take utilitarianism, for example. A simplified version of the root claim of utilitarianism is do that which produces the greatest good for the greatest number. John Stuart Mill, one of the important scholars in the utilitarian tradition, adds the maxim known as the harm principle, a claim that we should set things up so people can maximize liberty within the restraint of not causing harm. What role does anthropology play in this kind of utilitarianism? Well, we need to ask questions like, the greatest number of what? That is, what is the scope of the good we are trying to maximize? Is it for humans? Is it for humans in our group, however we conceive our group? If, as with many utilitarians, we lean strongly in the individualistic direction, we are inclined to deny the relevance of our personal ties to others. It may be that what is good for my wife and kids is not good for most of the people in my community. Should I tell my family when I deny them some good that I am maximizing the good for the many rather than for them who happen to be the few? We'll also need anthropological insight into the question of what is good. If we're supposed to do that which produces the greatest good for the greatest number, we'll need insight into what is good for those that we're seeking the benefit of. A quick look at history and the variety of cultures will tell us that agreement on this is far from universal. And what about harm and the harm principle? Not harming people sounds like something that should be included in every ethical system. But what constitutes harm? Does causing mental turmoil or anguish constitute harm? If it does, then should teachers stop offering any challenges to students? I know I've caused mental turmoil for students in the past with some of the tests and assignments I've given. In fact, some of you might be in turmoil merely contemplating the idea of a test. Maybe we should only apply the harm principle to physical harm. We still have to ask what constitutes physical harm. Are all kinds of physical harm bad and to be avoided? When a coach makes her team run laps and lift weights, both producing pain in the process, is she inflicting harm on her team? If we pay attention to anthropology, we can gain insights as to different kinds of harm and assess the possibility that some of the things we may take to be harms, at least at some point in our experience of them, may turn out to be part of the process of producing goods that we value. My approach to ethics is a very broad approach. If ethics is about the good life, it will include issues that go beyond what we today think of commonly as morality. We'll be led to ask questions like, is it good to go to college? Under what conditions is going to college a good thing? For whom is going to college a good thing? In what ways is going to college a good thing? Or we might ask, is having children a good thing? For whom and under what conditions is having children a good thing? When we talk about having children, what do we mean? Are we focusing solely on biological reproductive systems? Are we also including the social systems by which children are raised? Philosopher Lawrence Hinman has suggested that morality is similar to nutrition. I think that's a metaphor worth our consideration. Considering nutrition, can we say that the goal of taking in nutrients is health? Sure, there are likely other goals like taste, but surely health is something we'd want. But is there any such thing as health? Do we have a clear concept of what health looks like? If there is such a thing as health, is there also such a thing as unhealth? If there are both health and unhealth, how do we tell them apart? Are there reliable indicators for each state? If there are reliable indicators, is there any degree of agreement among people on whatever social level as to what these indicators might be? If there are such things as health and unhealth in the realm of nutrition, are there, on Hinman's metaphor, are there such things in the realm of morality? How far can we take this analogy between health with regard to nutrition and health with regard to morality? If the analogy holds up, at least for a while, what do you take to be signs of moral health? What are signs of moral unhealth? How do we tell the difference between moral health and unhealth? There have been times in my life that I've aspired to be healthier. Sometimes it's been a sickness, a lingering cough, perhaps that I've wanted to overcome. Other times I've thought I needed to lose weight or tone my muscles. I have aspired to greater health. If we can aspire to greater physical health, can we aspire to greater moral health? What would such aspiration look like? How would we carry it out? Can we have expertise in nutrition? If there is such a thing as nutritional expertise, what are its components? I'd think that one component of expertise in nutrition would be having adequate knowledge and understanding of at least two things: the nutrition needs of people and the nutritive values of various foods. There's another component, the proficiency at producing nutritious meals over time. In this form of expertise, both knowledge and practical skill are required. Some of you may be wondering why practical skill is needed and why knowledge and understanding isn't enough. My read of the situation is that the end or purpose of nutrition is healthy people. If I understand all the nutritional needs of people and all the nutritive capacities of food, and yet have no skill in putting these together so that people in my care take advantage of this understanding, that is, that they actually eat in a healthy manner, my expertise is not achieving its end. Let's consider expertise more broadly. Perhaps some of you are experts or no experts in some field. Let me caution you here about the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is a recently remarked upon phenomenon where a person who does some superficial yet focused study on a subject comes to take him or herself as an expert. And maybe you've known people dive into Google, Wikipedia, they read some articles, maybe listen to a podcast, go to YouTube and see some videos. They do this, they feel like an expert, but they're not an expert. What do experts look like in medicine, in basketball, in music, in cooking, in eating? Is there an expertise in eating? And in morality? What do experts do for us in each area? If there are experts in at least some fields, perhaps we can imagine there being a moral expert. What characteristics would such a person have? Would their expertise be primarily in the practice of morality or in the understanding or articulating of theories of morality? To what degree would we look to moral expertise as built on knowledge and understanding, qualities we would find in scholars and academics? To what degree would we look to moral expertise as built on practice, on actually being moral? How do we weight the two? What characteristics would you rank most highly in a moral expert? Are there any people in the world that strike you as members of that category? You take this person or these people as experts in morality, what effect do they have on the world around them? Maybe even on your life. If ethics is the inquiry into the nature of the good life and how to achieve it, one of the things we notice quickly is that there is more than one conception of the good life. It's even possible that you yourself have more than one conception of the good life, and that sometimes you feel conflict within yourself between those multiple options. Given the multiplicity of accounts of the good life, What is the place of any possible moral expertise? Finally, I wonder if any of you aspire to be moral experts. If you do, what benefit do you see accruing to yourself and to people around you from your expertise? How could you achieve your desired expertise? If you don't aspire to moral expertise, why not, if you believe there is such a thing? Suppose a child comes to you and says, I'd like to become a moral expert. Or maybe we could ask a more tame question. I'd like to become more moral or better at morality. How would you advise such a child? The week I wrote this, Steph Curry had just set the record for most career three-pointers in the NBA. People are speculating that his record will be unbeatable. Could we say that Mr. Curry is an expert at basketball, or more narrowly at shooting three-pointers? Compared to the vast majority of the population, he certainly looks like an expert. Does his being an expert mean that he never misses? That he makes every shot he attempts? Is he perfect? Well, let's consider another sport. A century ago, one of the biggest stars in baseball was Ty Cobb. He retired with a lifetime batting average of .367. Of the thousands of people who have played professional baseball, he's had the highest lifetime batting average. Could we say that Ty Cobb was an expert hitter? It sure looks that way to me. Does that mean that Ty Cobb was a perfect hitter? If we understand what a batting average is, then he surely wasn't perfect. Over 60% of the times he went up to bat, he didn't get a hit. I'd suggest that whether there can be expertise in the area depends on a few factors. Number one, can the activity in question be differentiated from other activities? When I bake, I turn on the oven. I can more easily imagine being an expert at baking than I can at turning on the oven. Number two, is there a significant range of performance in this activity? When I consider the activities of walking or eating cheeseburgers, there isn't a significant range of performance. Third, are there standards of performance? That is, are there ways to tell whether any given performance is better or worse than another? And fourth, is sustained attention given to improving performance? It might be that only in certain settings and under certain conditions that standards develop and attention is given to improving a performance. Does morality meet any of these criteria? Your first